Hello, my name is Tina Holmberg-Bergman. Unfortunately, as you heard, Tatja Hirvikoski, you see her in the picture, is unable to be here today. She was acutely operated for the retinal detachment, and I asked me to do her presentation. I am her PhD student and a specialist in the psychiatry of disabilities. So please bear with me when I'm trying to walk you through Henne's presentation. Of course, I need to read because it's not my research topic. If you have any questions, so I suggest that you contact Tatja directly after and by emailing her. I'm going to give you her email address at the end of this presentation. So this overview covers a few themes, such as what do we mean by mental health? And what do we know about mental health in autistic individuals? What are the consequences of mental health conditions in autistic individuals? And what are the factors that contribute to mental health conditions? And what are the protecting factors? That is, the factors that promote mental health. I'm also going to finish by sharing some thoughts about what do we know, what measures we should take based on what we know. So, what is mental health? Although this is an European Congress, I went to the US Department of Health and Human Services for a good definition of mental health. Mental health does not only include psychological and emotional well-being, but also social well-being. Mental health affects how we feel, think, and act. It affects if and how we handle with everyday stressors, how we relate to other people, and which choices we made. In this way, mental health has an impact on basically all major life domains and is therefore important across the lifespan. At least 1 in 4 typically developing people will be affected during the lifetime. That is 25%. We all know someone with a mental health condition. But, however, much less is known about mental health issues in autistic individuals. This is due to several reasons. For a couple of decades, both clinical and scientific focus has been largely on the core symptoms of autism and not on the associated common problems. In addition, symptoms of, for example, depression were often interpreted as just a part of a person's autism as such. There were no validated assessment tools adjusted for autistic individuals, which is, as a matter of fact, still a problem. And when we do have assessed mental health, the often used method has been collaborated information, such as information from the family members. These factors have led to an underestimation of mental health problems in autism, and also in a delay in methods development in regards to assessment, treatment, and prevention. I would also say that these factors have affected and are still affecting people with both autism and intellectual disability as well. Now I'm going to present you some studies about mental health in autistic children and adolescents. Even though there are knowledge gaps, there is also some things we do know about mental health problems in autism. I've chosen mostly meta-analysis and reviews to show you how common it is that autistic individuals struggle with mental health issues early in life. So almost 8% of autistic children have depression, an additional 10% subclinical symptoms of depression. This means a 4 times higher risk compared to typically developing children. This review mentioned here by Pessimenti and colleagues give a very nice overview regarding prevalence and symptoms and clinical presentation. Also assessment and treatment of depression in autistic youth. When it comes to anxiety, also anxiety disorders are very common in autistic children. Approximately 40% have clinically significant symptoms. And as many of you know, different kinds of sleep disorders are very common as well. The majority of autistic children and adolescents struggle with sleep problems such as long sleep onset delay, many night awakenings, poor sleep efficacy, and following daytime sleepiness, and so on, and so on. Research on sleep problems is a typical example also how parental reports are just not enough and may lead to underestimation of sleep problems. Using more objective measures such as actigraph give a higher prevalence. And then mental health in adults. Just like in the general population, mental health conditions get more common with increasing age. In this comprehensive review of HOLOX, they summarized results from a large number of studies and data from around 26,000 individuals, and observed that every third autistic person have a current anxiety disorder, while lifetime prevalence is around 40%. In the same study, they reported that 1 in 4 autistic adults have clinical depression, while the lifetime prevalence is almost 40%. That's very high numbers, and indicate almost 4 times higher risk compared to the general population. And just like in children, the sleep disturbances are also very common in adults and often associated with anxiety and depression. Actually, 80% of adults with ADHD were reported to have different kinds of sleep difficulties in a meta-analysis of 100 different studies. In Sweden, we conducted a register-based epidemiological study analyzing data from national health registers among autistic individuals. We also observed rather high, that is 12% prevalence of substance use disorder. This is a four-fold increase in compared to general population controls. In our data, lifetime prevalence for at least one psychiatric disorder was in between 60 and 72%, depending on which ASD group we analyzed. Highest risk was for those with ASD and ADHD, and lowest for those with ASD and intellectual disability. Also, as already mentioned, ASD and intellectual disability group may well be underdiagnosed regarding psychiatric diagnosis. In other studies on clinical samples, a prevalence of 80% have been reported for adults regarding at least one coexisting diagnosis. The focus on the study that I just mentioned was actually suicide attempts and suicidal behaviors. We included approximately 55,000 individuals with ASD and 270,000 matched controls. In the ASD without intellectual disability group, 1 in 10 individuals had attempted suicide at least once during their lifetime. Compared to the same-sex controls, females with ASD had clearly a higher risk. So 14% of women with ASD without intellectual disability or ADHD had attempted suicide, while the risk was even higher for those women who had both ASD and ADHD. In this group, both ASD and ADHD, 20%, that is 1 in 5 women, had attempted suicide at least once. This is a very high figure and clearly illustrates the severe long-term outcomes of untreated mental health conditions in this group. Compared to the females, the risk was a bit lower in males with ASD, but still much higher than in control males. Actually, so much as 3 to 5-fold higher than in controls. Taken together, having both ASD and ADHD, this is about 40 to 50% of all autistic individuals, is associated with a higher risk for suicidal behaviors. Other risk factors were psychiatric disorders, also having depression, anxiety, substance use disorder did not mediate the entire risk. We also found that family economic status played a limited role in this context. For ASD and intellectual disability group, the pattern of the results was quite similar regarding the role of psychiatric disorders. However, the risk was lower. And then suicide. Here are some more results from the same study, now regarding death by suicide. In the ASD without intellectual disability group, we observed 8 to 10-fold increased risk of death by suicide. Again, a higher risk in the group with the double neurodevelopmental disorders, that is having both ASD and ADHD. Compared to the female controls, autistic females had 12 to 14 times higher suicide risk, while the autistic males had 7 to 13 times higher risk compared to control males. Like for the suicide attempts, also for suicide, psychiatric comorbidity was an important mediator. In the ASD and intellectual disability group, the risk was lower, but still a twofold increase compared to their matched controls. We also think that even here there may be some underestimation of suicidal behaviors due to diagnosis overshadowing. What I mean is that suicidal behaviors in ASD and intellectual disability group are sometimes interpreted as stereotype behaviors or as accidents, and thus not reported as suicidal behaviors in the patient case files. To summarize, mental health conditions are common in this target group, and for a minority of autistic people, the consequences are as severe as a suicide attempt or death by suicide. Although less than 1% of autistic people die by suicide, this is much more than could be expected from the general population. And we should remember that suicide is, of course, always considered a preventable cause of death, as well as the disastrous failure for the society. Mental health issues do not only cause individual suffering, but also have economic consequences for the individuals themselves, their significant others, and family members, as well as for the entire society. For the autistic individuals, the price of mental health problems is high in terms of course, suffering, enormous suffering, and impact on major life activities such as education, occupation, economy, relationships, family life, and somatic health. Then about mental health, how it is associated with physical health. During the last years, more attention has been paid to physical health in our ASD, as well as the association between physical and mental health. We conducted a prevalence study at the tertiary clinic for children and adolescents with chronic pain and used social responsiveness scale for screening. Almost 14% of the children and adolescents with chronic pain had clinically significant symptoms indicative of ASD. In addition, in a nationwide register linkage study, we observed 16 years shorter lifetime for autistic people compared to matched controls. We, as well as others, have observed that the risk for overall mortality is due to a wide range of somatic diagnoses, in addition to suicide and accidents. People with ASD have a higher risk for circulatory and respiratory diseases, as well as cancer and so on, compared to the general population. We don't know all the complex reasons behind these results. However, there are emerging data looking at this. One such study is from Australia by Jane Wang and colleagues, who predicted overall mortality in 35,000 autistic people by using different predictors, such as intellectual disability, epilepsy, chronic health conditions, and mental health. In her study, the best predictor of overall mortality was not chronic health conditions, but mental health issues. So to summarize, many factors contribute to mental health problems in autistic individuals. Human behavior and mental health are complex, and a variety of factors contribute to mental health problems, such as biological factors, life experiences, and a family history of mental health problems, which in its own is a mix of biological factors, such as genetics, and also life experiences. There may also be contributing factors that are more autism-specific. ASD share genetic variants with other neurodevelopmental disorders, such as ADHD, and other mental health conditions, such as depression. Individual factors such as IQ, age, and gender seem to be important, but not always risk factors in a similar way as in the general population. Autistic traits, such as social communication difficulties, probably contribute as well, as do factors related to interaction and environment, such as loneliness, self-perception of being a burden to a family or a society, as well as camouflaging, that is, hiding your difficulties and trying to be someone else. I should also have the slide for you. I'll keep it on for a few seconds so you can see it. Other contributing environmental factors include or maybe stigmatization in the society, social exclusion, poor accessibility to healthcare, and a heavy load on significant others and family members who themselves are often in a desperate need of support. So where do we go from here? We must urgently improve all the steps of care, including assessment, treatment, and prevention of mental health issues in autistic people. We know that some people with ASD may have a higher risk than others, and we should use structured interviews and ask autistic individuals themselves. We should always try to identify the major risk factors in the person's life and treat mental health conditions. There is not such a thing that's only psychological. All clinicians, social workers, teachers, and so on meeting autistic people can work with prevention. However, we certainly need to develop evidence-based methods regarding assessment, treatment, and prevention. Here we have a lot to do. And luckily, we'll in a few minutes get some of very nice and important presentations on this topic regarding work that's on progress. Also, in my research group, we have a few ongoing projects regarding prevention and treatment based on psychoeducation, mindfulness-based stress reduction, and acceptance and commitment therapy act. So evidence-based methods are urgently needed on this field. What we all can try to do if we experience mental health problems, it has been listed here. While I would like to stress also as a clinician, that people with autistic difficulties very often need help getting professional help. They need help connecting with others. They need help getting physically active, helping others, or getting enough sleep. And they may need help developing coping skills. Finally, the US Department of Health and Human Services says that positive mental health allows people to realize their full potential, be productive, and contribute, as well as to cope with everyday stresses. We could also add that getting help with reaching these human needs, being in a meaningful context, and contributing according to everyone's own profile and capacity also promotes mental health. Thank you. I want to thank you for your attention and being patient with me. I know it's not the most fun thing to listen to someone who reads. Now please, if you have any questions, email them to Tatja .hirvikoski@ki.se. If you'd like to talk to me, you can come to my poster session on Navigator Act for parents to children with disabilities tomorrow at 11:30. That I can talk more freely about. Thank you, and have a nice day in Nice.